Tonight, demonstrators in Tehran continue to protest the presidential elections as thousands take to the streets. The Ayatollah promises a partial recount as the government there cracks down. I'm Jeff Glor. Also tonight, a shocking report about veterans' care. Thousands may have been exposed to HIV and hepatitis because of incompetence and negligence at the VA. The FDA issues an extraordinary warning to stop using the popular cold remedy Zicam after dangerous side effects are reported. Plus, climate change. The results of the most comprehensive report yet on what might be coming to your part of the country, from wild weather swings to rising seas.
This is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric.
And good evening, Katie's off. We begin tonight with remarkable events still unfolding inside Iran. Today, thousands marched again through the capital, disputing the official results that show President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad won re-election last week in a landslide. The protesters say the vote was rigged. Today's march was peaceful, unlike yesterday's. Iran's government says 7 protesters have been killed. Witnesses say gunmen fired from the roof of a building used by a state-run militia after a crowd tried to storm it. And there is late word the government has stepped up its crackdown on dissenters. The latest now from Elizabeth Palmer in Tehran.
There is a lot of political maneuvering going on here in Iran to contain the unrest. And one sign of that is the arrest of at least 100 prominent opposition members, and that includes some senior members of the clergy.
Today it was the turn of President Ahmadinejad supporters to fill Tehran's Freedom Square. Officials urged the crowd not to let the elections divide the nation. We will do anything to protect and defend our revolution, they said. This is exactly where yesterday thousands of opposition supporters had gathered. These vast rallies and counter-rallies are the public face of a huge power struggle taking place behind the scenes. Today's opposition rally was cancelled after the defeated candidate Mir Hossein Mousavi had warned his supporters to stay off the streets for their own protection. But guided by Twitter, young people streamed to an informal demonstration anyway. Foreign journalists were banned from covering it, but this young supporter said by phone they feel enough is enough.
This repressive regime cannot continue like this.
Today came the first sign the regime is bowing to pressure. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who wields ultimate power in Iran, said the government would conduct an investigation into the election. And the powerful clerics on Iran's Guardian Council agreed to a partial recount of the ballots in what they call contested areas. They also said they'd look into reports of people using false IDs to vote. But Mehdi Karoubi, another opposition candidate who came third on the ballot, said that's not good enough.
A really thorough investigation would conclude that the vote is invalid. Otherwise, this government will be illegitimate.
So you're saying the only thing that will satisfy you is a rerun of this election?
Yes.
Meanwhile, Iran's President Ahmadinejad was back to business as usual, traveling to Russia to attend a regional security conference.
Shortly before today's rallies began, the Iranian government suddenly canceled all foreign press credentials. That means we're no longer allowed out onto the streets to report on developments in this story. Elizabeth Palmer, CBS News, Tehran.
For a comprehensive look at the sights and sounds of the power struggle inside Iran right now, go to our newly redesigned website, cbsnews.com. Meanwhile, at the White House, President Obama said today he has deep concerns about what's happening inside Iran, but ultimately how this plays out, he said, is up to the Iranian people.
You've seen in Iran some initial reaction from the supreme leader that indicates he understands the Iranian people have deep concerns about the election. When I see violence directed at peaceful protesters, when I see peaceful dissent being suppressed, wherever that takes place, it is of concern to me and it's of concern to the American people.
It was the growing crisis in North Korea, however, that dominated the president's public schedule today. As he met with South Korea's president, Mr. Obama promised the U.S. will enforce the tough new UN sanctions aimed at limiting North Korea's nuclear ambitions. David Martin has more.
South Korea's president is a hardliner, saying under no circumstances can North Korea be allowed to acquire nuclear weapons. Today, President Obama took just as hard a line.
I don't think there's any question that that would be a destabilizing situation that would be a profound threat to not only United States security, but world security.
The American military's number 2 man told a Senate committee North Korea is still years away from being able to launch a missile that could hit the west coast of the United States.
This is not scientific, but we're dealing in at least probably another 3 to 5 years minimum.
The long-range missiles North Korea has tested so far could reach Alaska and Hawaii. But General Cartwright said he would tell the president the chances of shooting them down are excellent.
What are the percentages that we're going to be able to hit it and bring it down? What would you tell them?
90% plus.
90% plus confidence.
The more immediate threat is that North Korea might sell nuclear or ballistic missile technology to a country like Iran or even a terrorist group like Al-Qaeda. The UN Security Council has passed sanctions giving the U.S. and other navies authority to confront but not board any North Korean ships suspected of carrying arms. North Korea's response has been to continue preparations to launch more missiles, to which the president said,
belligerent, provocative behavior that threatens neighbors will be met with significant, serious enforcement of sanctions that are in place.
North Korean ships poke along at about 10 knots, so this is not a fast-moving crisis, and that's a good thing because right now the U.S. and North Korea are on a collision course. Jeff?
All right, David Martin. David, thank you tonight. Meanwhile, North Korea's government news agency said today that 2 jailed American journalists confessed to entering that country illegally. Laura Ling and Yuna Lee were sentenced last week to 12 years of hard labor. The Korean Central News Agency claims the reporters for Current TV recorded video of themselves knowingly crossing the border from China. Back in Washington now, Capitol Hill is famous for holding hearings, but rarely have members of Congress been as shocked as they were today as they got the results of a new report with this startling headline. More than 10,000 veterans who went in for checkups at several Southeast VA hospitals may have been exposed to HIV or other blood diseases. Nancy Cordes has that story.
Army veteran Thomas Mayo got a colonoscopy after the VA insisted on it, only to learn it may have left him with a chronic disease.
I'm really disappointed in him.
More than 10,000 veterans have now received letters warning them that the equipment the VA used for their colonoscopies may not have been properly sterilized. So far, 6 of those veterans have tested positive for HIV, 13 for hepatitis B, and 34 for hepatitis C. Mayo is one of them.
Now I have to take the chance of losing my husband to this disease, and I don't want to lose my husband.
Investigators carried out surprise inspections at 42 VA medical centers last month and found fewer than half had properly trained the staff on how to sterilize endoscopes.
How is it possible? I can't answer that directly.
CBS medical correspondent Jonathan LaPook has performed thousands of colonoscopies.
What stops contaminated fluid from backing up into this tube is this crucial green valve. Investigators found that not only was this valve missing, but this tube was not being cleaned in between patients.
Congressman Kendrick Meek called for the investigation after receiving a tip from the VA hospital in Miami.
These are individuals that allowed us to salute one flag, have put it on the line for the country. The country said that we would provide health care for them if they did that.
The VA says there is no way to confirm whether infected veterans like Mayo contracted their diseases from their colonoscopies or somewhere else.
This is one more event that is causing a lot of veterans to say, I'm afraid to go to my Veterans Health Center. Should they be afraid?
No, they shouldn't be afraid. In fact, they should have more confidence because the VA, as we've shown over the last decade and more, have been the first ones to report many things.
So the reporting a problem isn't the same as preventing it from happening in the
But
first
ignoring
place.
that it's there doesn't get it fixed at all.
The VA admitted today the problem appears to stretch back to 2003. Doctors stress this should not deter anyone from getting a colonoscopy, a procedure that saves lives. Jeff?
Nancy Cordes in Washington. Nancy, thank you. We turn now to health news tonight, and a major warning today about the over-the-counter cold remedy Zicam. The FDA is urging consumers to stop using Zicam nasal gel and nasal swab, saying its active ingredient, zinc, might permanently damage the nerves needed for smell. Since 1999, more than 130 consumers have reported losing their sense of smell after using Zicam. Our medical correspondent, Dr. Jennifer Ashton, is with us tonight. Doctor, always good to see you. We should mention $45 million in sales for these products affected. Been around for 10 years now, so why this action now?
Jeff, because this is an over-the-counter remedy containing some natural ingredients, the FDA is not responsible to regulate its safety before this type of product comes to market, but is responsible to regulate its safety after it's been on the shelf.
And now, how does the FDA think this might be damaging people's senses of smell?
It's unclear. One of the theories revolves around zinc, which is important in the right balance to regulate the sense of smell. Both too little and too much zinc can potentially be harmful.
But we should mention the FDA is not recommending a formal recall, and they're not saying it needs to be taken off store shelves. So where does that leave us?
What the company is saying now is they are seeking a meeting with the FDA to discuss the safety profile and the data that's out there on these two products. They stand behind the safety of these products, but to be clear, the FDA is recommending that for the consumer who are using these products, they should discontinue the use, stop using it, speak to their doctor if they're having any problems.
All right, Dr. Jennifer Ashton, thank you so much. To the economy now, and the White House has been working to fix the financial system's many problems for nearly a year now. Tomorrow, President Obama will propose sweeping new regulations to help consumers and put new limits on bankers. Chief White House correspondent Chip Reed has a preview.
President Obama says the Wall Street meltdown was caused by a dangerous combination: wild risk-taking by financial institutions and a lack of government oversight. Today, he said he wants to make sure it never happens again.
We have to make sure that we've got a updated regulatory system that hasn't been significantly changed since the 1930s.
The president will officially roll out his plan tomorrow. One major component, he wants to create a brand new Consumer Financial Protection Agency with broad authority to crack down on banks and credit card companies that engage in unfair and deceptive practices. The plan would also strengthen government oversight of all large financial institutions, toughen regulation of derivatives and other complicated financial instruments, and allow the government to take control of massive companies like AIG if their failure threatens the entire economy. But many Republicans in Congress say the plan will lead to too much government intervention and continued reliance on bailouts.
If people like bailing out Chrysler, if they like bailing out GM, if they like bailing out AIG, if they like bailing out Citi and all the other financial institutions, they'll love this bill.
And while the president says his plan will streamline regulation,
we have not, in fact, added a whole host of regulatory agencies.
Some critics say it would be much more efficient to consolidate the alphabet soup of regulatory agencies, the Fed, FDIC, SEC, and others, into one or two super regulators.
The administration did consider trying to consolidate all those agencies, but decided against it in part because there's just too much opposition in Congress. Jeff?
Chip Reed at the White House. Chip, thank you. Still ahead on the CBS Evening News, health care reform. The president says he knows how to pay for it, but can he really afford the bills? A reality check. We always knew overhauling our healthcare system would not be cheap, but today we learned more about the staggering sums involved. At least $1 trillion over the next 10 years. according to the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office. And there are growing concerns that President Obama lacks a realistic plan to pay for this sweeping reform. Details now from Wyatt Andrews in tonight's Reality Check.
How are we going to pay for that, Mr. President?
That one question, how the nation really pays for health reform, just got a shocking wake-up call. The Congressional Budget Office, CBO, said Senator Ted Kennedy's health care proposal could cost $1 trillion over 10 years, and 36 million Americans would still be uninsured.
It's a preliminary set of numbers.
Democrats called the numbers inconclusive. Even the CBO called its own report incomplete. But the sheer magnitude of what Congress is considering is undeniable.
The news yesterday from CBO is a turning point in the health care debate.
So what will health reform cost? The president has also estimated $1 trillion.
And will be deficit neutral.
And claims he can achieve reform without raising the deficit. The fact is, this means raising taxes. And where the president claims he can raise $267 billion by limiting the tax deductions of high-income wage earners, the fact is most of Congress opposes this idea.
And if they're unwilling to do that, they're going to have to pick an option that has other political difficulties. And so the question is, which kind of poison do they want to drink?
The president has also outlined more than $600 billion worth of spending cuts, some of which cut Medicare payments to hospitals. Last month, the hospitals claimed at the White House they would support billions in savings. The fact is, they now say they never meant cuts, that payment cuts are not reform. What's coming, and very soon, is a dogfight over that $1 trillion. And every interest group that promised to compromise to achieve health care reform will be arguing someone else should go first. Wyatt Andrews, CBS News, Washington.
Finally tonight, the government's strongest warning yet on climate change. The White House put out a report today that says the U.S. is already feeling its impact. It also spells out the conditions that your grandchildren and their grandchildren may someday face. Here's Daniel Seberg.
Today's report, claiming to be one of the most comprehensive ever, says global warming is reshaping America now and will for decades to come.
But I really believe this report is a game changer, and this report demonstrates, provides the concrete scientific information that says unequivocally that climate change is happening now.
According to the report, human activity is making most of America hotter, wetter, and possibly more dangerous. In the Northeast, by late this century, summer will arrive 3 full weeks earlier. So hot that in New Hampshire, summers will become more like those in North Carolina. Hartford, Connecticut, and Philadelphia will suffer through 100-degree temperatures for up to 30 days a year.
And we're expecting between 2 and 11.5 degrees of additional warming this century.
In the southeast, rising water temperatures will feed ever more intense hurricanes. They may not hit land, but if they do, rising sea levels may wipe out wetlands that usually slow storms.
Extreme heat waves, which are currently rare, will become much more common in the future.
Across the Midwest and Great Plains, that could mean scenes like these. The 1995 Chicago heat wave that killed 700 people. By 2050, the number of average deaths there related to heat waves could double or even quadruple.
We can expect the Southwest to see more droughts.
Throughout much of the West, wildfires will increase, and animals and plants ranging from monarch butterflies to cactus will be harmed as higher temperatures affect habitats. On the West Coast, California cities already have the worst air quality in the nation, with 8,800 deaths a year. That's expected to get even worse with rising heat levels. But diehard critics remain unconvinced.
Somebody has a story they're trying to pitch, an agenda that they're selling, but they're not necessarily basing their report on the best available science.
A casual observer might point out that this summer has been unusually cool, like in New Jersey yesterday, where a hailstorm looked like a blizzard. But according to today's report, America's long-term forecast is ever-increasing heat, and the opportunity to change that is quickly disappearing. Daniel Seberg, CBS News, New York.
And that is the CBS Evening News tonight. For Katie Couric, I'm Jeff Glor. Harry Smith will be here tomorrow. Good night.